Welcome to Mental Health Awareness. I'm Dr. Ann Coretti, Director of Student Services for Nauset Public Schools. And today my guest is Sue Landers from Child and Family Services. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Ann. It's a pleasure to be here.
And today we're going to talk about anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I see we have many kids in our school system that have anxiety. And I know you see many kids at Child and Family Services that have anxiety. And we thought it would be I thought it would be a good idea if we had a conversation about this particular topic.
Great.
So, the big question, what is anxiety?
What
How
is
do you
anxiety?
know if you're anxious?
Yeah. Well, first of all, everybody gets anxious. And it's, as we were talking earlier, it's a way to kind of, your nervous system kind of gets on a little bit high alert, and that can be a good thing. I'm a little nervous talking to you right now, but hopefully that's going to make my brain fire quicker and come up with answers. And I think that when anxiety becomes a problem is when it makes you not do things, that it interferes with your life, that I wouldn't come out here, that I would stay outside and not sit down next to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you just talked about good anxiety.
Yeah.
So, making your brain fire. So, anxiety can be actually very helpful to us.
It absolutely can be helpful.
It can be very motivating to get
Yes.
things done.
Absolutely. You want to prepare for this interview. You don't want to just walk in willy-nilly. And that anxiety about the upcoming interview will make you sit down and go over notes or read a chapter or study harder. Yeah.
So that's part of the human experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But we want to talk about when it really becomes debilitating
Right.
and gets in the way of normal functioning.
Right.
So what are the signs of anxiety?
Well, I do think that the signs of anxiety, what we know when we're feeling anxious is kind of a racing heart, dryness of mouth maybe, clammy hands, queasiness in the stomach, could be a headache. You know, everybody's different. Everybody experiences anxiety a little bit differently, but those are some of the major symptoms of anxiety.
Is it different for children versus adults, or is it pretty much the same
I think
physiological?
I think physiologically it's the same. I think kids, particularly younger kids, aren't sure what they're feeling because it feels very physical. They feel it in their stomach. They have a stomach ache or their head hurts. And not that they're nervous or worried or anxious about tomorrow's test.
Sometimes they can't make that connection.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And I think that's where parents can be very helpful. Oh, are you thinking about anything?
Or they can't sleep. Right? That could
Lack
be
of sleep,
a
yes.
big one. For adults
Absolutely.
too.
For adults too, yes. Yes. Yeah.
So are there ways we can help kids and help adults, and are the ways different? Yes and no, I would assume.
Yeah, but in some ways they are the same. The ways to help kids and parents cope. And I know we're going to, there's medication, so I'm not going to talk about medication and those kind of interventions, but I think that in terms of a mind-body intervention and approach, knowing what you're thinking really, really helps, because there's a phenomenon of catastrophizing. I'm going to flunk. I'm going to do the worst. I'm going to completely fail, or whatever it is. That kind of self-talk can either help you or hinder you. And so knowing what you're thinking and being able to very consciously change that. I'll be okay.
So that's an important point. I'm going to fail this quiz, can lead to I'm going to fail the whole course, can lead to I'll never get into a good college, can lead to
Absolutely, it just
snowballs.
totally snowballs, so that you're so anxious going into that test.
When really it's about the quiz.
Right. And, you know, in 10 years, you're not even going to remember what grade you got.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important.
So you're talking about keeping things in perspective.
Yes.
What we say to kids sometimes is keep small problems small, right? And
Yes.
I say that to adults too.
Well, because absolutely.
Yeah. Don't keep upping the ante. This is going to happen. That's going to happen.
Right. So that's a cognitive intervention is paying attention to what you're thinking about and how you're either causing more anxiety or reducing your anxiety. And the other approach is because your mind affects your body can affect your mind. So if you take 3 long, deep breaths, and we breathe all the time, but taking some slow, deep breaths calms the nervous system. When we're anxious, we tend to breathe very shallowly. So being able to take a deep breath from the diaphragm, sing a few bars, because when you activate your diaphragm, you're activating from a deep place in your abdomen. Mm-hmm. So it immediately kind of calms the nervous system.
And centers you. You'll see,
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll see sometimes people giving concerts. Mm-hmm. They'll come on the stage, and before they play the piano, they'll take a deep breath and get themselves centered, and then they play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's an important test-taking strategy to read the question, take a breath, and then write your answer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing that happens when we don't take in enough oxygen, we're not getting enough oxygen to our brain. So being able to breathe deep is just an easy solution that we do all the time, and it works. So
another strategy could be go for a walk to expel some of that extra energy, nervous energy.
Absolutely. Any kind of exercise, I think, helps bring an anxiety level down. Go for a walk, pet your dog, do yoga.
But identify those areas that is a coping strategy for you. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes people don't know or cognitively think about what would work for me. And to really give that some thought so you have a tool to pull from when you're in those moments.
Yeah. And I think we all breathe, but I think we all do have coping strategies. It's, as you say, being able to identify, oh, that helped me. And then know that when you're feeling really anxious, to do that thing or something like that, and try different things and see what works, getting your mind off something, reading.
Sometimes redirection is what you're saying. Change your
Absolutely.
focus.
Absolutely.
Break that, going up the ante.
Right. Whatever can kind of interrupt that thought pattern can be helpful, real helpful. Yeah.
And so yoga has been a tried and true
Absolutely.
strategy.
There's been lots of research that shows that flexible body, flexible mind, that if you take time to do yoga or any kind of exercise really, but yoga really does help calm your nervous system.
So we're also talking about self-regulation.
Yes,
right?
we are.
And
You know all the words.
Well, I should hope so. So with children, for example, teaching them how to self-regulate, and I think this is, over time, this has become a problem because many families have so many things structured for kids that sometimes there's little time, I don't want to say no time, but little time for kids to do imaginative play or find a way to soothe themselves without us imposing a way, right?
Yeah. When I look at kids today and see how structured their life is, versus the time when I was growing up, and there was lots of hours of unstructured time where we were just outside playing.
Come in when the street lights go
That's
on,
right,
right?
when you hear the dinner bell. And being able to unwind in that way. Another thing that I think reduces anxiety is being out in nature. We've got great resources here on the Cape. I mean, just looking at the ocean can calm you down. But if kids don't have enough of that free downtime to be able to go out and play or take a walk in the woods or take a walk on the beach, that is dysregulating over time. They don't have time to calm down. They're moving, moving, moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And certainly with, all the access they have to social media on the computer, whereas in our generation, we weren't on the computer. We
Right,
didn't
we
have
could take
computers.
a break. Right, we could take a break from it all.
Yeah.
And yeah, today kids are on a lot. They're interacting, they're involved, engaged, but in a way that doesn't necessarily calm them.
Right. I think of it as like rebooting your brain, shutting
Yeah.
down the computer, shutting down your brain and just, letting it be
Yep.
before you start another activity.
Yeah, and I think that's another for, in terms of shutting down your brain, not that your brain shuts down during meditation, but meditation is a really great intervention for anxiety. Being able to focus on one thing, because we are a society of multitasking. So to be able to just bring your attention to one thing, even for 5 minutes, gives your brain a little bit of a break.
I think the new research, speaking to multitasking, says there's a myth there
Yeah.
that you're getting a lot of things done when you're really not.
It's not as effective.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Because you're diverting your attention. It's better to focus on one thing at a time, and yeah.
Well, I think that's true. Get it done, focus.
Yeah.
But also planning your day. When you're going to do this, when you're going to do that. And you can even plan in when you're going to have downtime.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that one of the symptoms of anxiety is excessive worry and not being able to turn off at night and go to sleep. And I think if you're experiencing that kind of either having trouble falling asleep or falling asleep and then waking up and your mind is going, to me that's a signal that there hasn't been enough downtime in your day. So that you've still got processing to do, you've still got things that you need to think about, and you haven't had that kind of relaxed time to do that.
So one technique could be just writing everything down.
Journaling is a great way to get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper, and then you can let it go.
Yeah.
Because lots of times we kind of swirl around in our head. So being able to just purge it.
And then you have a reference point the
That's
next
right,
day.
then you can go back to it.
And do your check-off list,
Yes.
so to speak.
Things to do. Write down those things to do, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the clientele you see, parents, kids, do you find that there's maybe a genetic component? I mean, not from a neuroscientific perspective, and maybe I shouldn't say genetic, but a family component
Well, I think
of
there's,
anxiety.
yes. I think there's learned behavior.
Okay.
There's learned ways of coping. And so if your parents don't cope effectively with stress and they get more and more anxious, that we absorb and we learn from our parents. And so that is what kids learn to do. They learn to, think the sky's going to fall, or catastrophizing, make making small problems huge problems.
Ruminate over
Ruminating.
things.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as a strategy for a family, it's important for families, I guess, to keep themselves in check.
Yeah. Well, it's not fun to live with chronic anxiety.
Yeah, right.
So,
It can be
it's
debilitating.
not. Yeah, it is. It can be debilitating. And can prevent you from living as fully and deeply as you're capable of doing. I think of, I've worked with clients who, they're afraid to go into the grocery store. A lot of people on the Cape are afraid to go over the bridge. I don't know what that is, but
Oh, the grocery store? Why is that? Germs?
germs, or a lot of people that they may run into that they feel anxious about seeing, or
So, social anxiety?
so social anxiety. Yeah, people can get, anxiety that's targeted in one particular area becomes a phobia. So, yes, social anxiety, being afraid to go out to dinner with friends. So then you start pulling back from life. You start isolating. You start withdrawing, rather than feel, yes, I'm anxious, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to breathe through it, or I'm going to get through it, or it'll be okay. And kind of coach yourself into doing things that might be a little anxiety provoking.
And that could be a good thing, right?
Absolutely, I think it could be a good thing. Yes.
At least try, take a step,
Right. And I think that that's important about, setting realistic goals. So that you can feel some success, that you were able to get 3 things at the grocery store and go in the fast checkout and get back out, and nothing bad happened. That those successes build on one another, and you can spend more time the next time, and so, yeah.
Or just driving up to the grocery store, being one step,
Sitting in the parking lot,
right?
one step closer.
Right.
Getting out of the car, getting back in the car.
So, what do you see in terms of your clientele? You've been a therapist for
So long.
how many years? 20 years?
Oh yeah,
About
at least.
something like that.
Yes.
And do you see things? People more anxious, less anxious? Probably more anxious.
Yeah, I think this is an anxious world that we live in. There's, just looking at the news can send your anxiety soaring. So
Well, that's true. And sometimes you just have to turn it off,
that's it.
right?
Well, you have to pay attention to how you're responding to all the stimuli that's out there. And yes, if watching the news just gets you, and a lot of people watch the news right before bed. That's not a good idea.
Not good.
It's not good for your sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there's different kinds of anxiety too. I mentioned phobias, and then there's obsessive thinking. You were talking about ruminating, but obsessive thinking where you just can't get off the track, and then that can lead to compulsive behaviors.
So does it all start with anxiety? Anxiety can lead to phobia. Anxiety can lead to
Yes,
obsessive
although I
compulsive.
think recently they've just changed obsessive compulsion to a category on its own, but it used to be folded in within anxiety. But it's a way to cope sometimes with anxiety, that if you just get the table as clean as it can be, you don't have to do anything else, that you can just focus on that. So do you see what I mean? It's kind of a coping strategy. But if it keeps you from getting to work on time or going out with friends, then...
So obsessive compulsive can also, we're talking about rituals?
Yes.
Like making sure this is done, check this, check
Right.
that. And if checking this, that, and the other thing become such a laborious task, then you can't get out of the house, right? So
Right.
it all comes back to daily functioning. And
That's
how
right.
do you know when a problem's a problem? When it interferes with your daily functioning, right?
Because we all have routines, and routines are comforting. You know, we know that at this point we'll have lunch, and then we order our day, and that makes us relax into our day more. But if it's to the point where we can't do our day because of the compulsions that are getting in the way, that's the problem. Yeah.
That is the problem.
Yeah.
So that also gets into flight, fear and flight responses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, that's to me that's more related to trauma, or when there's real danger, when we're really feeling threatened.
And you can get worked up to that point,
You
too.
you can. But I feel like anxiety is a low-level worry that's constant.
Okay.
Whereas that flight-fight response is really, it's really in response to an immediate danger. But I hear what you're saying, that you can work yourself up to feeling like you are in danger. Yeah.
And and where does worry play in with anxiety?
Well, I think worry is almost another word for anxiety. You know. Yeah.
But there are sometimes that people worry just maybe around, I don't know, a minor situation. And then the worry then can become very anxious, and then can lead to one thing after another, right?
Right, right. You know, as we said before, we all have worries. Things that, cause us worry. I think for many people, financial worries, you know, they're just,
Certainly.
yeah. And on some level, that gets us back to what we were just talking about fight or flight. But on a very basic level, that's survival. If we don't have enough money, it makes it hard to survive. So there is danger there. And we can get to a place where we're really feeling very like we have to move. We have to pound the pavement. I mean, it can be constructive or debilitating. Yeah.
So with the clients that you see, have you had much success with helping people?
Yes, I think that there are, you know, some very simple things that are helpful. What we talked about earlier in terms of either cognitions that
Means thoughts that someone
Yes.
has and keeping them in check.
keeping them in check, or replacing unhelpful thoughts, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that ever happened, with more helpful thoughts. Oh, I'll be able to get through this. That just immediately changes what's happening in your nervous system. Because if you feel like, you know, you can't get through it, your body is more on high alert. You feel like this will be okay. Your body relaxes. So there are cognitions and thoughts that you can change. And then there's also things that you can do behaviorally we talked about structuring your day so you've got more downtime, being able to take some time to take some deep breaths, take some time to meditate. And you don't have to go into an Om meditative state to meditate. You can have, you can meditate while you're washing the dishes, you can meditate while you're walking. It's just really bringing all of your awareness into that moment. How the soap feels on the dish, on your hands. Being very, very present to the moment gives your brain a break to stop worrying about whatever it is that is consuming you. Yeah.
Well, that's certainly very helpful hints about how to treat it, what to do. But there are also other types of disabilities that's associated with anxiety. For example, on the autism spectrum, we'll have kids who are very anxious. And I think strategies for those kids, and I think it's human nature. I think we all want a sense of predictability.
Absolutely.
Right? And
Sure.
security.
Yeah.
What's going to happen next? So ways to help kids is to just help them plan their day. Even if their day is so structured, at least they know this is going to happen, that's going to happen.
Absolutely, that routine is comforting. And I think the other thing that is harder sometimes is to have those kids be able to roll with the unexpected.
Right.
Because when something is not exactly right, then they're completely dysregulated.
And I think that could happen to people anyway, regardless if you're on the spectrum or not, right?
Yeah, there's a little bump in the day. Yeah.
Right, but keeping it as a bump.
Right.
And not catastrophe.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And that's something that we do have control over. The bumps in the days, they're going to happen because not everything can be predictable and structured. But how you respond to those and what you say to yourself and how you get through them, that is what we can control.
So if you had a message for people, a takeaway, what would it be in terms of anxiety? What would you really want people to understand, to know?
I guess I would want people to know that there are things that they can do to help. That there are things that they can think about that will be helpful. There are things that they can do physically that would be helpful. And that they can learn to manage their anxiety.
And I think sometimes it's helpful for people to get professional help to untangle their thought process and to give them those ways of thinking of things a little differently, right?
Right, because sometimes we're not aware what we're saying to ourselves. We're so used to it, we don't hear it. It's just there. But to have somebody else say, "Did you just hear what you said?"
Right.
Makes us, pay attention.
And not only what you're saying to yourself, but maybe what you're saying to other people and how they're receiving that message, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And that's, what we were talking about with parents imparting that to kids. That how you speak to kids about when they're feeling anxious and what they can do to manage it. Yeah.
So if people want some professional help, some professional support, they can certainly call Child and Family Services. You take all sorts of insurance coverages. There's also private practitioners in the area, and people can access them through their mental health insurance, or their health insurance rather, and see who's on their list and give people a call.
Yeah.
Treatment, it's individual for each person. It doesn't have to go on for years and years and years.
No.
And many times a therapist will work with the person and say, well, what's your goal? What would you like to do? What would you like to accomplish? And develop a plan, just like we would with anything else.
Yeah. And I think if you are experiencing not doing things because you're too anxious, then I think it's time to get help of some kind, because being able to get out and do the things that you might want to do but feel too anxious to do them, you can do those things. So there is help.
Well, Sue, thanks so much.
My pleasure, Ann. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. And I'm sure we learned quite a bit.
Well.
And I know you're working with us at the schools and along with many other people. And just thank you again for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for doing this.